When I first picked up A Scanner Darkly, I thought it would be your average sci-fi novel, a mix of dystopia, cool gadgets, and the occasional identity crisis. But the more I read, the more it felt like a free fall. And that might be exactly how Philip K. Dick wanted it. Beyond commentary on drug addiction and surveillance, it's a deep philosophical exploration of identity, reality, and how easily both can fracture. Dick's life, too, was full of these fractures. Behind these bizarre plots and paranoid characters was an author struggling with drug abuse, broken marriages, and a mind that often blurred the lines between reality and hallucination. A Scanner Darkly is in many ways his most personal novel. His real-life experiences seep into the story, blending his autobiographical pain with science fiction. Everything in A Scanner Darkly I actually saw. I saw even worse things than I put in A Scanner Darkly. I saw people who were reduced to a point where they couldn't complete a sentence. They really couldn't state a sentence. And this was permanent. This was for the rest of their lives. Young people. These were people maybe 18 and 19, and I just saw, it was like a vision of hell, and I vowed to write a novel about it sometime. Philip K. Dick was haunted in real life. By the time he wrote A Scanner Darkly, Dick had gone through multiple marriages, lost custody of his children, and was recovering from years of amphetamine use. He admitted that drugs had taken a serious toll on him, and much of A Scanner Darkly reflects that. Substance D, the drug in the novel that splits the brain in two, reflected what Dick saw happening to himself and his friends during the 1960s and 1970s drug culture. In fact, the character of Bob Arctor has striking similarities to Dick himself. Both found themselves increasingly isolated, yet surrounded by people whose lives had been destroyed by drugs. Dick later said, "I got mixed up with a lot of street people just to have somebody to fill the house." Like Dick, Bob Arctor descends into paranoia and confusion, and like Arctor, Dick was left wondering, how did I get here? At the heart of A Scanner Darkly is Fred, a narcotics agent tasked with surveilling Bob Arctor, a drug user. The kicker? Fred is Bob Arctor, but because of the drug substance D, Fred doesn't even realize he's watching himself, and the split identity is a metaphor for the way drug use can dissolve a person's sense of self. In his scramble suit, Fred, who was also Robert Arctor, whatever. Dick's language shows Arctor's chaotic confusion. Fred's identity crisis taps into deep philosophical questions. Who are we when we can't trust our own perceptions? And this echoes Immanuel Kant's idea of the nominal self. The self as it really is versus the phenomenal self, the self we experience. The scramble suit may hide Fred's identity, but it also makes it impossible for him to fully know himself. As Arctor's mind deteriorates, he has to ask, which of them is me? We see a similar loss of identity every day. Social media and constant surveillance make it easy to present multiple versions of ourselves. Yet taken to extremes, we become like Arctor, on the outside looking in and unsure where reality lies. You don't have to be in a drug-induced haze to see how chilling that is. Substance D, the drug that destroys Arctor's brain, is significant. Substance D splits the brain into two, with each half not communicating with the other. It's a metaphor for the fragmentation of self that comes with drugs, but also in a world full of contradictions. In many ways, Arctor's brain becomes a battleground where the question of who am I plays out with brutal consequences. Dick knew this battle well. He spent years using amphetamines, allowing him to crank out up to 4 novels a year at one point. I can't even imagine. But the speed also wrecked his mental health, pushing him toward paranoia and psychotic breaks. And by the time he wrote A Scanner Darkly, Dick had gotten clean, but the damage lingered. The novel became his way of processing the trauma he'd witnessed and experienced. It was cathartic, therapy for psychological and pancreatic tolls. What does a scanner see? Into the head, down into the heart? Does it see into me, into us? This line strikes at the core of Dick's obsession with surveillance. In A Scanner Darkly, everyone is constantly watched, and even the people doing the watching don't know who they are anymore. This is where Dick's novel hits close to home in today's digital surveillance. Fred's scramble suit is an exaggerated version of the masks we wear online, where our real selves get lost behind profiles, usernames, and curated feeds. It's like living in a panopticon, always watched, never free. And in this world, where every click and keystroke is tracked, the line between who we are and how we present ourselves blurs more every day. Despite the grim subject matter, Dick injects dark humor throughout the novel. Arctor's life may be tragic, but it's also absurd. This kind of tragicomedy, where humans laugh in the face of existential absurdity, runs through much of Dick's work. The characters know they're doomed, but they keep trudging along because, well, what else can you do? This same strange mix of tragedy and comedy, it's the same that addiction often brings. Characters like Barris, who's convinced he can make cocaine from materials bought at 7-Eleven, are laughably deluded, but there's a tragic undertone. A system they can't escape has broken them. And Dick's humor reflects the absurdity of people continuing to run headfirst into their own destruction, even if they crack jokes along the way. One of the most poignant parts of Scanner Darkly is its afterword, where Dick reflects on the real people whose lives were destroyed by drugs, and it's a mistake to skip this. Here he lists friends and acquaintances who either died, went insane, or simply disappeared, saying, "This has been a novel about some people who are punished entirely too much for what they did." It's a rare moment of raw honesty from an author who often hid behind science fiction tropes. And in the afterword, Dick isn't talking about Bob Arctor or Substance D. He's talking about real people, some of whom he loved. This personal connection is what gives A Scanner Darkly its weight. As Dick points out, many of these people weren't bad. They were just caught up in a world that chewed them up and spit them out. The afterword brings the novel's themes into focus, so behind its sci-fi elements lies a very human story of suffering and survival. Stepping behind the curtain of drugs and paranoia, Philip K. Dick's A Scanner Darkly explores the nature of identity, the ways we fracture under pressure, and the thin line between reality and illusion. After reading the book, I couldn't shake the feeling that Bob Arctor's struggle was my own, or maybe all of ours. As identity feels increasingly fragmented and reality slips through our fingers, A Scanner Darkly asks the question we all face: who am I, really? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. We are on a mission for 1,000 subscribers and getting closer every day with your help. And this one, it's a good one to watch next.